Welcome. This series of 5 webinars was developed to educate families about recent updates to the Annotated Evaluation and Reevaluation report forms. While the law has not changed, changes were made to the annotated report forms in early 2016. Annotated forms are designed to provide notes for better understanding of each section of the forms. The handouts that accompany this presentation can be found on Peel's website and on the patent website. On slides with a direct reference to the annotated report documents, there is a note at the bottom of the slide that shows you where to find the information on the form. On many slides, you will also find a folder icon in the upper right-hand corner, which tells you the handouts that support the information on that slide. This is Part 4, which focuses on the summary of findings, review of evaluation, and follow-up.
We have divided the content into 5 parts of 15 to 30 minutes each. We recommend that the viewer watch the parts in order as the information builds from one to the next. The 5 parts of the series are listed on this slide. As you can see, Part 4, which is highlighted, reviews in depth the summary of findings, review of evaluation, and follow-up. Key words that you may hear in this presentation series are evaluation and reevaluation. These are the processes for gathering data to determine if a child needs special education and, if so, the types of programs and services needed. Throughout this presentation series, the word parent refers to a parent or guardian. In Part 3, we reviewed the evaluation report sections that provided detailed descriptions of all assessments, observations, and evaluations. In the summary of findings section of the report, the team summarizes and organizes the data collected throughout the evaluation process and highlights information that supports the team in making a decision about whether the student is eligible for special education. We will walk through each area that must be addressed in the summary of findings. The full title for this section of the evaluation report is Summary of Findings / Interpretation of Evaluation Results, and the instructions direct the team to consider all available evaluation data and record the team's analysis of the student's academic and functioning levels. As a result of participating in this presentation, we hope that you will be able to discuss the type of information that should be included in the summary at the end of the evaluation report, answer the question, how does the summary of findings help a team determine if a child qualifies for special education services, and use procedural safeguards if the parent does not approve of all or part of the evaluation report.
So, let's talk about how children are found eligible for special education. Using all of the information gathered, the team must answer the 2-pronged questions that we have discussed in earlier presentations and are seen on this slide. 1. Does the student have a disability? And 2. Does the student need specially designed instruction and/or related services? When reviewing the summary of findings, it is important that the information and data are connected to the referral questions that are listed in Section 1 of the report, as well as any other concerns that were discovered through the evaluation process. The reason for referral drives an evaluation, and there should not be an unexpected recommendation at the end of the process. If a student was referred for a concern about reading, and the evaluation report identifies a student as emotionally disturbed, then there was a breakdown in the evaluation process. As we discussed in Part 3, if new or different concerns arise during the evaluation process, the school team must get consent from the parent to conduct additional assessments. Remember, communication is key throughout this process. The first area addressed in the summary of findings is academic achievement. All of the areas on the slide should be summarized in concise and plain language. It is important that the information here is accurate and current, because if the student is found to be eligible for special education services, the information in this section is transferred to the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance section of the IEP, the Individualized Education Program. Parents should review the information carefully and ask questions about any information that the parent doesn't understand, is inaccurate, or outdated. The next area addressed in the summary of findings is functional performance. The information in this section should address strengths and needs related to how the student functions in activities of daily living, such as those you see listed on the slide. Remember, strengths are very important to list because what goes in the evaluation informs what goes into the IEP. Again, it is important that the information here is accurate and current, because if the student is found to be eligible for special education services, the information in this section is transferred to the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance section of the IEP. The last area addressed in the summary of findings is behavior assessment. This section should summarize evaluation data gathered related to student behavior, including social and emotional levels of functioning in various environments, or when there are problem behaviors. This section is where the results of a functional behavioral assessment, or FBA, are included. A functional behavior assessment is the process used by a team to collect and analyze data that helps determine the function of a student's behavior. If a student is found eligible for special education, this information is utilized to develop a positive behavior support plan as part of the IEP. The result of an FBA is not simply a report of data about when and where negative behaviors occur. The results of an FBA also include defining one or more replacement behaviors that can be taught to the student. Replacement behaviors are socially acceptable behaviors that allow the student to meet their needs. For example, if a student is trying to escape a task, such as doing work in a particular academic task, the FBA should provide specific recommendations to the team about how to teach the student another way to get this need met, like providing a break card that the student can use instead of acting out. Some core vocabulary in this section is the key word that parents might hear is functional behavior assessment, FBA. A functional behavior assessment is the process used by a team to collect and analyze data that helps determine the function of a student's behavior. In other words, why the student might be engaging in the behavior. All behavior serves a function. Most behaviors, but not all, fall into two categories. A student may be trying to escape something, such as a particular task, and B, seeking something, such as attention. Now, let's look at Section 6, Determination of Eligibility and Educational Needs. In this section, the evaluation team utilizes the information gathered throughout the assessment process to determine whether the student will be identified as eligible for special education. We know that eligibility for special education requires a yes answer to both questions. This section of the evaluation report offers the team 3 possible responses to the eligibility question. The team can determine that the student does not have an IDEA category disability, or the student does have an IDEA category disability but does not have a need for specially designed instruction, or the student has an IDEA category disability and as a result, needs specially designed instruction. If the team answer is C, the student is eligible for special education and related services, and the individual education plan IEP process begins. If the team is considering whether a student has a specific learning disability, then there are extra detailed requirements to make this determination. The evaluation report includes a separate section to document these details. All 10 items listed on the screen must be completed whether or not the student is found to be eligible. If the student was not evaluated for a specific learning disability, it is recommended that the team indicate N/A non-applicable for each item.
Once a team determines that a child is eligible for special education, the team must list the identified disabilities and recommendations for the IEP team to use as they develop the student's IEP. 2 spaces are available on the evaluation report to list identified disabilities, primary and secondary. If more than 2 disabilities exist, those can also be identified. Recommendations to the IEP team should include key information from the evaluation report that should be incorporated into the IEP. For example, data about present levels of academic achievement, strategies, and supports that are needed based upon the evaluation. Once the evaluation report is given to the family, the IEP meeting will be scheduled within 10 days. Sometimes the school staff asks the parent to sign a waiver so that the IEP can be developed more quickly, even at the same time as the meeting where the evaluation report has been reviewed. However, the parent has the right to wait to hold the IEP meeting so that they have time to understand and digest the information that was just provided to them from the evaluation report. It is important for parents to understand the information so that they can participate as equal members of the IEP team as they develop the first IEP. A key term that parents might hear is waiver. A waiver is a document that allows the school to bypass mandated legal timelines. For example, a parent may not want to wait the time allowed between when they receive the evaluation report to the time an IEP meeting will take place. 2 big ideas in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act are FAPE in the LRE, that all children are provided a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. The recommendations for the IEP team must address how the team can provide the student with access to and participation in the general education curriculum. As the recommendations are reviewed and the IEP is developed, it is important to remember the IEP is a means for a child to achieve meaningful educational progress. The first consideration is to provide special education supports and services in the general education classroom. Specially designed instruction can be offered in general education classrooms and other school environments with typical peers. The last decision that the IEP team should make is educational placement, which means where special education supports and services will be provided. Special education is a service, not a place. Lastly, instruction with typical peers to the maximum extent appropriate must be considered if an IEP team is discussing a service that will require the student to leave the general education classroom. It is important to talk about the impact of that on the student's access to and participation in the general education curriculum. For example, if a child will miss reading instruction in order to receive speech therapy, the team will need to consider if that is appropriate for this student. Some core vocabulary here to remember is IEP, which refers to the Individual Education Program. This is the contract between the school district and the parent that explains what the child's educational program will look like for 1 year. This will be addressed annually or as needed and revised to meet the child's needs. It's really important that the IEP, this contract, specifies an appropriate education in the least restrictive environment. The term least restrictive environment means that the school is responsible for instruction with typical peers to the maximum extent appropriate, alongside students without disabilities to the extent appropriate for the individual student. Generally, appropriate means that the education meets the student's special needs and allows the student to make educational progress. The regular education classroom is the first placement choice of the IEP team. When an IEP team, which always includes the parents, considers where a student will be educated, it must ask what can be provided in the regular education classroom or activity and what supplementary aids and services will provide extra supports in the regular education classroom environment. Examples might include assistive technology, special behavior strategies, use of a resource room, or accommodations or modifications in the curriculum or assignments. An important document to be aware of is the Notice of Recommended Educational Placement, or NOREP. The purpose of this notice is to summarize for parents the school's recommendations for the child's educational program and other actions taken by the school. One example of when the NOREP is used is when the school proposes initial provision of special education and related services. Other examples might be when the school proposes to change the identification, evaluation, or educational placement of the child or the provision of a free appropriate public education. Remember, the school may not proceed without a parent's written consent for provision of initial special education services. This is specified in Section 8 of the NOREP. Completing and signing the NOREP is the only way to indicate whether a parent agrees or disagrees with the entire IEP and educational placement. When an individual signs the IEP itself, that only means that they participated in the IEP meeting. If the parent disagrees with any part of the IEP, they should check "I do not approve" and sign the form. If a parent does not sign and return the NOREP within 10 calendar days, the law says that this means the parent agrees with the NOREP and the IEP, except in the case of an initial evaluation. So parents must sign the form. There needs to be documentation so you can move forward. If it's not in writing, it doesn't count. If a parent feels that their rights have not been met, the Procedural Safeguards Notice provides detailed information about how to proceed. Schools must provide a Procedural Safeguards Notice with each IEP. A useful tool for understanding parent rights is the Rights Done Right video series on the PO website. It is included on the list of supplementary resources posted with this presentation. Parents who have questions about their options in this situation can reach out to any of the evaluation workgroup partners. Their contact information is provided at the end of this presentation. Again, a key document is the Procedural Safeguards Notice. This describes your rights and the procedures that safeguard your rights under state and federal special education law, including the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, commonly referred to as IDEA 2004. These laws and regulations require local education agencies to provide a free, appropriate public education to all students with disabilities who are in need of special education. A free, appropriate public education, or FAPE, means special education and related services designed to meet the individual educational needs of your child, provided at no cost to you, in conformity with your child's individualized education program.
So, Cindy, talk about what happens if a parent disagrees with the evaluation.
Well, if the parent disagrees with the evaluation report, there are steps that can be taken. First, the parent should put in writing notification of their disagreement.
Yes, there is a space on the NOREP that says reason for disagreement. This is a good space to write disagreement, but IDEA does not require parents to provide an explanation.
Well, one option is for parents to simply state in writing their disagreement with the evaluation and to request that the district pay for an independent education evaluation, sometimes called an IEE.
Exactly. And then the parent needs to follow up with requesting the NOREP, or / prior written notice, of the school's response.
At this point, the school will either agree to pay for the IEE or file for a due process hearing to show appropriateness of their evaluation or reevaluation.
Okay. If the district approves the IEE, they should provide a list of evaluators for the parent to choose, or the parent may have their own independent evaluator that would need to be approved by the school.
Sure. Parents can learn more about how to proceed with the request for an IEE in the Procedural Safeguards Notice and the Rights Done Right video series.
Yes, this area can be very confusing for parents and families, which is why we really encourage them to use the contact information and resources at the end of this presentation. In review, to be sure that you understand the highlights of this section, the purpose of the Summary of Findings section of the evaluation report is to summarize and organize the data collected throughout the evaluation process, and to support the team in making a decision about whether the student is eligible for special education. If the student is eligible for special education, the report also includes recommendations for the IEP team. Parents can take up to 10 days to review the evaluation report before an IEP is developed. If parents disagree with the evaluation report, they must sign the NOREP and indicate disagreement and exercise their procedural safeguards. You have completed Part 4 of this series. We recommend that the viewer watch the parts in order as the information builds from one to the other. Our next topic focuses on the reevaluation.